G'day and welcome to Inforunners. I'm Execute, joined today by my partner in crime, Algared. How you doing, buddy?
Doing pretty well. Doing pretty well. Can't complain too much.
I don't think we're too tired for a change.
No, no. I was talking to a friend. Stop saying that because I always feel tired. But
Mm,
when you're saying it all the time, every time, people go,
mm,
yeah, whatever.
yeah.
But
Oh,
no,
we just say how we feel
pretty
at the
good.
time. It is what it
That's right.
is,
That's right. You just.
Yeah.
But today's pretty good. I
Mm,
made sure I chilled
mm,
and did pretty much nothing, which means I'm
yeah.
feeling pretty good. So
Well, I'm round in the corner with my sickness, so I should be right in a
yeah,
couple of days,
you're sounding a lot better.
which is good.
I,
Yeah. I
I
just,
don't know whether people could hear it or see it on Friday, but I could certainly tell,
mm.
so
Oh, you know me better than most, though, buddy. So
mm,
yeah. Oh, I just dropped something. All right. So on that stream on Friday, one of the things we looked at was pad sizes, and I realized when I was talking about it that there's actually a whole episode in there, and this might not be
and
the most exciting episode for some people.
we
Um,
decided we will do it.
but it really does affect a lot of things.
Oh yeah.
And it's also, you're going to see how we've used it in episodes before. So one of the ones I was thinking about literally just before the show that I didn't share with you, Alfred,
Mm,
was one of our most popular episodes, the one on the Endeavor, the last chance for the Endeavor that we did.
yeah,
That affects this. We could
yeah,
literally go back now, and now we
and
have this information and kind of highly theoretically work out
mm,
roughly, like using what they've planned, like scale up
yeah,
and
what
go.
ships would fit and the rest of it. So
And if you
um,
scale those ships with the current look of how things look and just scale them up, you go, this is the minimum length of the Endeavor at the current design, and
yeah,
that would be really interesting. So we
well,
might do that in the future.
just having a quick look, knowing that the Endeavour,
Well,
that
y- you're back.
you
Go
know,
again.
knowing that the Endeavour was supposed to be able to take two cutlasses,
Yeah.
we know because of the pad sizes how long that's going to be or how wide that has to be.
Yep. And they've
Um,
now said that it's also got to hold an Apollo. So,
Yeah, and
things
so
like that.
that
Yeah.
again adds to that
Mm,
metric and sizing. So that significantly
mm,
changes or informs on how big
yeah.
or otherwise that ship will be.
Hmm.
Um,
And yeah. And so we're going to go through, like, we'll start with the Endeavor then, since we've already kind of started on that one. But we're going to go through some of the original stuff, like how it used to be, and then kind of go into how it was. And then we're going to, so at the end of last year, someone extracted the actual metrics from the files.
mm,
And I think it would be really good for CIG to do a thing on metrics. I think it's worthwhile for people to learn
mm,
both how it's going to affect their game. And it's almost like a slot system, as you'll
yeah,
see. And and when you kind of see it laid out, it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of obvious. Why wouldn't they do that from the get-go? But there are also examples, as we're literally about to talk about, um, that'll still be in the game that are very bespoke. And
mm,
and you almost want them to go, geez, I wish they'd go back and fix that now.
yeah.
And so one of those, obviously, we'll go back to, we kind of went through the Endeavor. I think, do we need to go to the Endeavor again? I don't think we do we? So
Probably not,
um
but certainly originally it was as we said in the notes originally, the original pad system was the Wild West.
mhm,
What anything goes.
yeah.
If it fits, it sits. If it's
Mm,
that whole plethora. And it was just a dog's breakfast.
mm. So the other one, obviously, we also talk about the Crucible a fair bit, Alfred. So do you want to talk about that a little bit then? Because
Yeah,
that's the same kind of reason why we kind of recommend it. It's one of those, that and the Endeavor, the last two left, yeah, of the
yeah.
old metrics.
So the Crucible is a repair ship, and its scarab has to be big enough to fit a Hornet.
Hmm.
Now, when the Hornet grew, that meant the scarab had to grow, which means the Crucible has to grow.
Mm,
But how big does it become? With a metric system, we can actually see exactly how big that scarab has to be, width,
yeah.
length, and height.
Mm,
Now, this is unique because the scarab can actually open up its hangar, open up the roof, so you can actually fit ships that are higher than that metric. But it means if you're in space, you've got to be wearing a spacesuit to do it. But if it's closed up, you can just walk around normally, which means you can actually do bigger or better repairs, or component swap outs and other stuff. So the Carrick, the Crucible, it becomes a quite unique that ship, even though it's going to have to row to the metric just to fit the Hornet. So
yeah. All right. So one of the ones that obviously at the moment right now that's kind of slightly disappointing when you start thinking things like this is the Carrick. You know, having that bespoke hangar space just for the Pisces, and yes, there are other things that can fit in it, but it's not built for that. Can you, you know, like obviously me and Algared can, but I kind of I'll ask you in the comments. Can you see there now being a benefit if they'd made that a non-bespoke 2 metric hangar? You know, you could have that a lot. You know, any essentially S1 size ships could have gone in there, and they would have been, you know, had full working facilities, and now you can't, so to speak.
And another classic example of that is, like, you can get an Aurora into that hangar because the Aurora's got a low height. It's tight squeeze, but you can actually get it sitting, you know, properly nose to tail, no weird angles, but you can't get a 100i in the hangar, even though it fits length and width, because when its wheels are up, the height's too high.
Yeah.
And so you can't close the hangar. So that becomes an issue. It becomes a problem. So if it was a metric hangar for the size 1 hangars, then that would, or the new metric of those small hangars, that would be awesome.
I think the other question I'd put out there to people in the comments is, like, do you, like, now knowing this, like, yes, you can see the advantage, but it's also a disadvantage there as well, because it would fundamentally totally change the size of that ship. You know, like, that would almost mean that hangar has to take up 2 decks, not 1, like it does right now. So, and that would change the look of the ship from potentially the outside. Like,
It would be far.
Well, yeah, you'd have to have you'd have to make accommodations for that, wouldn't you? So you'd either be losing or gaining somewhere. So, all right. So you also, the other one you put on here, Algared, is the Reclaimer, because one of the ones you back in the day, it used to be able to land on the pad, and it doesn't really. You can't spawn them on pads anymore. They're too big.
Yeah. So it used to be able to spawn it on the 00 pad. I think the 890 was the same. You could spawn it on the 00 pad. When they started changing things, you can't spawn it on those pads anymore. You've got to go to either or Grimhex or something like that to be able to spawn the ship.
Yeah, any of the cities of Grimhex. But I do think that also shows other signs of things changing down the road, because I think most obviously now that ship needs capital docking collar. So when they go back to do a gold pass, it'll probably get all that. And we could pick any ship and say it needs gold pass at this point, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think probably the one that really sticks out from what we're talking about, it's a Kraken, though, originally, you know, because it's got 4 extra small hangars and 2 small hangars on the deck.
Yep.
And then it's got 2 internal hangars. Now, the original design document in the Jump Point 10 doesn't give a size of that internal hangar. The release document from CitizenCon, it tells us that it's got an internal hangar bay where whatever fits sits. And so at that point, we have no metric for that internal hangar.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing that's made it very confusing. They have internal sizes and external sizes. And so sometimes a developer will be talking and you can't tell when he says small whether he means our small or their small. And I'm very quickly moving to just using S1 through to S6, because it's a new naming convention and it just solves all that. There's no confusion. It just removes it for me quite quickly.
The classic is they had snub small, snub tiny, small, extra small, as a separate pad, then medium small, large medium.
Yeah. What? And it just it sounded great initially, right? It really does, right? Because it's just, hey, it's the sizes you're used to in real life. But because they've obviously made a change somewhere along the line internally, it's just made it confusing.
Yeah.
So I think the numbers simplifies it a lot for me personally. And
100%.
I think it might take a little bit to get everyone to move over to that, but that's where I think they need to move. I think it will make it a lot simpler. Again, it's two metrics, just like everything else. Makes more sense.
And the second you link that number to the pad size, like you could do the words as well, but because there's so much confusion over what we mean by small, or what we mean by extra small, what we mean tiny, or what we mean by extra small, you need to move away from that, even though you could use those same words with those metric sizes and just go to a numbering system. So
all right, so the last thing before we kind of move on from the old stuff is obviously the docking of the constellation. Now, this is not technically pad related, but it's also something very bespoke. And if you kind of run it through there, I think I can only think of maybe possibly one other ship that might do it like that, right? And other than that, and that would be the Reclaimer if that ends up being like the thing I always talk about, but I won't get into that now. But long story short, again, imagine if that was a pad that you landed the Merlin on rather than docked. It would totally change how that ship works, and maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. I don't know. But they're the type of things I want you guys to start thinking about. Like, if they'd done this from the beginning, would have made it better. And I think it actually shows a learning and an evolution that they've actually learned as they've gone along. And so I think we should skip this to the stuff on the ship hangar now, Algared, before, and then come back on to the changes. So the original ship hangar, the way that worked, Algared, I remember you talking about how you drive for so long in your little golf cart because you'd have so many ships that it essentially spawned a new room, didn't it?
You could it used to be able to spawn up 10 or so rooms, but you could actually go into the code and make a change so it spawn as many rooms as you had big ships. And basically you had the big ships on the left-hand side and 2 small hangar spaces on the right.
Yeah.
And if you had all large ships, you'd have nothing in that empty that right side. But if you had all fighters, then they'd fill up that side.
And then the next step after that was when they brought out the Revel and York and that, and you got the kind of custom looking hangars. They moved to more of a like different sizes of ships, and back then I think it was about 4 in total was the different sizes, right? And now we've even got more than that, more than just the size of ships. We've also got sizes for vehicles as well. So you know,
So
where we were talking about using numbers like S1, you could also use V1 or V2 or V3. You know.
So originally, like when they moved to the new form, like when the first hangars came out, there was graphic design look in terms of the different hangar styles. But when they moved to the one where we could decorate the walls, we couldn't put all our ships out. You were limited. You had to make choices. And I think you could get up to 2 or 3 rooms. But the biggest room they had to make a special room for the 890 and the Reclaimer because they wouldn't fit.
Yep.
But that would take up a whole room. You could get, or you could get 3 cutlasses in a row down one room, or you could get a number of fighters, and then at the top end you could get 4 golf buggies because that was the only vehicle around at that time. So and it's changed big time.
I think you're even seeing a changing game now where they're moving away from pads into hangars.
Yeah.
Like all the space station recently, like they've still got the pads, but they are non-functional, so to speak. They've all moved them internally inside, and that's for ship spawning reason. It makes a lot of logical sense to me.
They're not suddenly just appearing, and that's one of the not, I wouldn't say bugs, but it's one of the hassles with, say, the 890 when you spawn the 890 at a space station. It suddenly just people watching will see an 890 or a Hammerhead or any of those ships that spawn at the docking column just appear. You'll notice at Grimhex, all the pads are still there, but everything's put into the hangars now.
Well, eventually, it's not going to happen that way, is it? Eventually, it'll be you have to spawn that ship at a hangar like everyone else.
Yep.
And if it docks with something, so if it docks with a station, it'll dock. But if someone comes along and wants to shoot the shit out of it, they can. The station will retaliate, but they still have a chance to destroy it. You know, you can park it in that safe location for the evening, but chances are it won't despawn. It'll just stay there. You know, and someone could, you know, if you don't have someone there guarding it or you don't lock the door, just walk in and take it. So the whole way things are going to work is really going to change, which is interesting. All right. So if we take the ships that we looked at before, so let's look at some obvious advantages to the metrics, right? The first one is obviously continuity. I'm going to butcher that word. Continuing. I can't say it.
Continuing.
No,
Continuation.
Nope. It's where they're all the same.
Yeah. All right.
And someone will say in the comments and laugh at me, but yes, I'm trying to pronounce it, and I know what it is in my head, but I can't say it out. It won't let me say it.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're trying to say. Add the word for all the same.
It's like continuality or whatever it's called. But yeah. Anyway.
Continuity.
That's it. Continuity. That's the word I was looking for. That's the one. And so you can see how, and a really good example of that at the moment is something like, say, the Odyssey and the Polaris. And them both having the same size hangar. But then you go look at, say, something like that needs to be the same size hangar for a crucible, but the crucible, well, I'll let you talk about it. So how it's not as cool.
So Bev, all three of those ships have the ability to take a fighter or that size ship. But the crucible Scarab, when it's closed, can actually be a lower height, whereas it can open up and take ships that are higher. Whereas the Odyssey and the Polaris have to have that height metric put in to their hangar so the ship can fit. Otherwise, the ship ends up being like the Carrick, where the ship can go in, but it's too high and it can't close the hangar, which means it's always venting atmosphere or whatever. So, and that will one day be a thing.
Yep. So if you also take that back to other things like we said with the Kraken, you can now very quickly see that. Actually, I'll flick over real quick, Algared, to this.
Yep.
So this is actually little thing we've prepared for you. In the brackets in the middle there, you can see what people used to call things.
And why it becomes confusing.
And so basically you've got your X, Y, Z coordinates on the right in meters. So that's how the game's decided to do it. So we've done it in meters as well. But as soon as a ship kind of goes outside that axis, one of those axes, it just jumps up to the next size.
Yeah. So a ship that is 7 meters tall, even if it's the same, so that the X, Y, Z axis, Z is the height. If 7 meters tall, it will be forced to go into a size 2 hangar just because of the height.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the other metrics are. If its length is 17 meters, it'll get pushed into the next metric. And that's really what we're looking at.
And what you'll find is that certain landing zones, they will actually bundle hangars together. Like you can currently spawn an Archimedes or a Merlin on exactly the same size pad in a landing zone. So like let's take Lawville. They all spawn in the same size, you know.
Yep.
That they actually are, you know, 1, 2, and 3.
Yep.
But there will be places outside of that where they will be more bespoke landing zones.
Yep. And this sizing is really important when we look at, say, the Kraken, because I know people have argued, I know the Kraken can only land dragonflies on the external pads. But even the early design documents said that the external pads were 4 extra small, i.e. size 2, and 2 small. But they're the biggest part sizes. So they talk about small and medium, and they're talking medium small, so size 3. And so you can see there you've got the 4 pads, and you look at the design documents and the paraphernalia, and got Buccaneers on the small pads, on the size 2 pads, and you've got Cutlasses on the medium pads, on the 2 pads.
Another example is they can take the metrics here for jump points as well. So again, knowing what we know about what they've said in the past, more than likely small jump points will be S1 through to S3, and then S4 is probably going to be on its own, and then S5 and 6 are probably going to be on their own as well.
But I've got to throw that caveat in there that, as we always say, CIG will do whatever they need to do to make it work and be playable.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. But at the moment, with the information we've given, that kind of looks like where it's going to fall. But again, they can do whatever they need to make this game work. But again, you can quickly see how we're able to use this, and it'll probably show you some episodes going forward that you could probably predict out for yourself what we're going to do in the next little while anyway. And so we just thought it'd be really good to give you guys a bit of a heads up and get your thought processes going to understand this, because I think it really it's going to be really important information. And what'll probably end up come down the line eventually is when all the ships are out, is people will start to learn when that break point is. What is the break point between S1 and S2, and what's the biggest ship that's on for an S1, and what's the smallest ship for an S2, as an example. And they can just go bang, and people will know instantly where they all fall into. It'll be just another thing that people hold up in their memory banks.
Yeah. So that pretty much is the metrics of ship size and how they influence the pads and how they'll influence the size of those ships with hangars. So, and if I was guessing on the internal size of that for the Kraken, for that internal hangar bay, because the jump point article says it's got 2 internal hangars, and the release document said, hey, it's got a hangar and whatever fits sits. But the graphic that they used in the concept sale was inside the Kraken you had a buccaneer. And so my guess would be the internal hangars are size 2 hangars, but they're kind of joined as one. So anything that fits on that space of 2 hangars will be able to fit.
Makes me think it might be a little bit like the Endeavour hangar, where we know that it has to hold 1 Apollo and it has to hold 2 cutlasses. So I think it might be a smaller version of that, where it holds 1 cutlass and 2 buccaneers. Oh, no, not and. One or not and, or sorry. But you forgive me for that. But you get what I'm trying to say,
and I think CIG, I think with the metric system, the key thing is that CIG definitely seem to be moving away from if it fits, it sits. And I know that's going to upset a lot of people, because I can fit 50 million dragonflies into my Idris. Why can't I launch for more? Well,
I think there are places where it will still fits, it sits. I think a lot of those will be things like, if you're in space, it's totally fine. But if you're trying to put a caterpillar on the deck of a Kraken and fly it into atmosphere, you are lunatic. That thing will slide right off, and as it should,
or if you're doing those rolls or everything else, and there's not enough stuff, you're in trouble, because they'll shift and slide and crash into the rest of the ship and cause damage and possibly blow up. So yeah.
All right, with that then I will flick us back over. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Is there anything that you kind of found surprising there, or was it all kind of pretty, did you guys know about it already? But I think it is going to be important information to know, especially if you're building bigger fleets going forward. And it's going to help ascertain what ships will fit into other ships and things like that. Because again, if this was shared, we'd probably not be getting those questions all the time, like, will this fit?
Yep.
And stuff like that.
And I think once people start to realize the size of the hangar that's there, so what size all we need to say is what size it, size 1 to 6, what size is it? After that, we know what fits. That's all we need to know.
Well, there is overlap too, because some of the vehicles will fit inside an S1. Like we know an Ursa is can be spawned on the same pad as Pisces, as an example. So you can technically spawn a ballista, but a ballista is also a little bit bigger. So there's some overlap there. To still some things to find out, mainly on the vehicle side, though, to be honest with you.
I think from memory, the key point, or the key thing that you see CIG changing is the Odyssey was said to have a size 1 hangar from memory.
Yep.
So that was the first time we're seeing, or no, size 2 hangar, wasn't it? But they said a size. They said it had a size, and then they talked about the,
it's the same size as the Polaris hangar, which would technically make it an S2. Yes, you are correct.
But I remember them saying the actual size, talking about an actual size rather than.
They would have called it. They call it a small. But I'm not going to ever call it that again because it's so confusing.
Yeah.
As you saw from what we had up before. So yeah.
Anyway.
All right. With that, then, don't forget to like, subscribe, ring that notification bell, and you go extra mile on Patreon if you want to. Anything else you want to add, Algared?
Yeah, tell us what you think of metrics. How will it impact your fleet? How will it impact your movement of ships? Yeah.
All right. He's been Algared.
He's been Execute.
We'll catch you next one.
Take care.